What's the most unintelligent thing you've heard an intelligent person say? In university, a third-year student in virology class asked the lecturer how biological viruses were able to evolve and infect computers. As a software engineer, I say we burn them at the stake. Posted this before, but it's worth repeating. My mum once said there was no gravity on the moon. I explained that there was less gravity on the moon, not no gravity. She wasn't having it. There was no gravity on the moon. The longer the conversation went on, the angrier she got. At the end, the following exchange took place. Okay, mum, let me try and explain it this way. If there's no gravity on the moon, like, no gravity at all, then why didn't the astronauts just float off into space during the moon landings? Now you're being deliberately stupid. That's obvious. They were tied to the spaceship. Then why didn't the spaceship float away? Because it's really heavy. Ugh. Well, at least she didn't think it was a hoax. A friend of mine, when discussing that my birthday was on the 7th of June and my parents' anniversary was on the 6th of June, told me I was made because my parents were celebrating their anniversary. He was our valedictorian. When I was in college, my housemates were discussing when they were conceived. Nothing too interesting about my own conception, but that was an awkward moment to realize that my little brother's birthday was exactly 9 months after my own. When that commercial came out with the guy fighting a bear for salmon, one of my friends said it's obviously a trained bear, the bear that was just doing karate moves. He is an engineer now. Okay, it's obviously a well-trained bear. We love to rip on my mate for his blatant lack of general knowledge. Firstly, he stated there were 27 letters in the alphabet. Wait, no, it's 52, isn't it, and defended himself. And secondly, he was adamant that the ISS had artificial gravity that they can turn on and off at the press of a button. He's 21, at uni. 52 is correct if you count uppercase and lowercase as unique contributors to the whole. Yeah, let's go with that. At the top of a mountain, someone asked what the elevation was, and someone else responded, I crap you not, well the trail to get up here was 4 miles, so we must be 4 miles up, if not higher. This comes from me the other day. My shirt wasn't buttoned correctly and I couldn't possibly wrap my head around why it wasn't even on the bottom, so I told my wife that it must be the new style these days. I can neither confirm or deny my level of intelligence in other areas. You're not alone there. It takes me 3 attempts to put on a lab coat every time. Not say, but do. I had several teachers at my university that had MBAs and PhDs struggle to turn on a light projector. There was this one time they were all gathered around a simple projector trying to turn it on, doing all sorts of things around it like it was rocket science and looking really confused it wasn't working. The projector wasn't plugged to electricity. Nice. Watching teachers struggle with technology is one of the cringiest things. Some of it is just common sense. Like a preschool that I worked for a few years. The teacher would call tech support to turn the volume back up because she couldn't figure out how to do it. I would offer to help, but no, tech support had to do it. My friend is incredibly beautiful, smart, and kind. That being said, we were paddleboarding once and big, fluffy clouds kept blocking out the sun. Huge bummer, since it was windy and got pretty chilly in the shade. She looks up and sees that the big clouds are thinning out and wispy. Long clouds are blowing in. She says, oh, I was bummed because there's more clouds coming in, but those thin ones are high enough that they'll go behind the sun, so we're fine. Have not and will not ever let her live that down. Thinking that you can catch a genetic disease. My mother, everyone, graduated from a really hard private school, has 2 different degrees in economics and law. I had a friend try and argue this with the fact that HIV was a genetic disease because you can be born with it. Joke's on him. Mommy gives you that during the contact in pregnancy and birth. I'm IT. My entire day is intelligent people being idiots with computers. I spent 45 minutes helping an engineer who couldn't print. It took 30 minutes for him to open devices and printers. I work in a repair shop. I can't tell you how many people come to me saying their laptop won't turn on. Dead battery, plug it in, or that the sound doesn't work. Hit the volume buttons. It hurts. Talking in a bar to an obviously successful and wealthy businessman. I like this city but there are so many homeless. I don't get why they don't just get jobs so they can buy houses. He thought street level poverty was voluntary. There are some people that openly choose to live that way, but definitely not all of them. Me and my sister were for some reason talking about mice and I must have mentioned their bones and my sister laughs at me and then looks at me like I'm stupid and goes, "Mice don't have any bones." I laughed thinking she was joking, but she really thought they were boneless and was trying to make me the dumb one. She is legitimately really smart most of the time, but sometimes she'll look at me and say something absurd like chipmunks are just baby squirrels or ham doesn't come from pigs with the straightest face. Like I get being confused about something, but sometimes I wonder where she is getting these ideas from. Like I wish she was freaking with me, but she's really not. Luckily she's the funniest person I've ever met and I know she's smart. She just has her ditz moments. She also didn't know lambs were young sheep. I love her. Wait till she finds out about veal. I was talking roller coasters with a man whose intelligence level is far above mine. He insisted that a certain roller coaster had to be shut down because it kept getting faster and faster each time and there was no way to stop it. I reminded him that, because of physics, it's impossible for a roller coaster to go any faster than its normal top speed. He didn't believe me. Forget a perpetual motion machine. This is a perpetual acceleration machine. Good thing they shut it down, or it would have destroyed the Earth and possibly the universe in only a matter of hours. My cousin is an electrical engineer. We went to a Chinese restaurant one night that her brother bartended at, and were ordering at the bar. Bro is telling us about all his favorite things on the menu since he had just started working there. And she goes, "Joe, what about those white chicken wings over there? What's he eating?" and points to a guy down the bar with a plate in front of him. "That's a pile of dirty napkins. Sounds like someone needs an eye exam." There's no ocean in BC. He had been living in Alberta, the province next to BC, for 5 years and had been to BC many times, not to mention the fact that he was born and raised in Canada. When I showed him on Google Earth and asked if he had ever seen a map of our country, he said that he assumed that there was more land on the other side of the border. He also said, "Well, I knew it was called the West Coast, but I didn't know there was ocean there." The more I think about it, the more frustrated I get. My wife is one of the most intelligent people I know. She's costs lawyer and is doing very well in her career, but sometimes her common sense is just not there. I was discussing getting a coil to help with periods, and out of curiosity I asked her how she thinks it's inserted. "You swallow it, It took her a moment, and my confused shocked face to realize that wasn't the correct answer. To be fair to your wife, I don't understand what you're talking about either. I had a good friend in high school who was top 10, always got A's in all his AP classes, got a 33 on the ACT, etc. And out of nowhere he asked, how do garbage men make enough money to live off of if they only work 1 day a week? It was at a sports banquet and my parents overheard it and thought it was the funniest thing ever. Alright boys, my time to be stupid. I never realized I needed the answer to this. Someone please humor me. A bit late to this, but here goes. In high school our psychology teacher would start to the class off with some random trivia and whoever got the answer right would get a little candy. So this one day she asks what continent is Spain and obviously everyone puts their hand up and she chooses a girl who rarely answers the trivia, for good reason. And she responds with Montreal. I still don't understand how a human being can be that clueless. My high school physics teacher had a PhD in aerospace engineering. He was retired, and he strongly believed that global warming was a hoax and that Mars was going to be colonized by the year 2023. And that Mars was going to be colonized by the year 2023. I'm rooting for 2028. The company I work for is spread around several buildings. We heard a rumor that there was a fire at the main building. During a meeting my manager received a phone call about the situation. When he got off the phone he told us the fire rumor was no big deal and that it was only a drill. One of the engineers in the meeting immediately asked how in the world did a drill catch on fire. Must not have been a mechanical or electrical engineer or he'd know how a drill could catch fire, from experience. My history teacher said that Earth is in the center of the universe. It also said that in our textbook and I think they meant solar system. If it said Earth is the center of our observable universe, that would technically be correct, but I doubt that's what it said. Worked at a gas station. I viewed a client pull up, whip a door open and slam it against the large, shiny silver pole that protects cars from running into gas pumps. She then proceeds to furiously get out, scream with her head facing the heavens, and run into the gas station telling me I need to be more careful where I place those. The thing has been cemented into the fricking ground for over 20 years. Bollards. Those things are called bollards. Probably me. Got into an argument with my best friend over whether or not butter contains milk. I was on the losing side of that argument. My logic was that when it melts it's kind of like oil. My mind wasn't working very well. I bake with butter and made it once before. My dad repeatedly asserted that his high IQ and science degree masters in astronomy meant that his opinions were right about any given subject. He thought his politics, religion, views on child rearing, etc. had to be correct because he was smart. He thought he could work in any field, once, memorably, wanting me to submit his resume for a job that required a PhD plus a decade of experience developing drug candidates, despite lacking so much as a bachelor's in chemistry. Dad was a genius, make no mistake, but he made the very ordinary mistake of thinking a limber intelligence makes up for a lack of knowledge and experience. I'm really smart myself, and in some ways, it can. I can bridge knowledge from one application to another, but I don't assume that just because I know a lot about medicine, I'm an expert in politics, understand how to take a good X-ray, or even that I'm the only person I work with whose opinion I can trust. My dad repeatedly asserted that his high IQ and science degree masters in astronomy meant that his opinions were right about any given subject. I didn't know NDT had kids. Neat. Africa is not a continent, my sister. Her reasoning was that if you were going somewhere in Europe you would say I'm going to Germany instead of saying I'm going to Europe, but when people are going somewhere in Africa they just say I'm going to Africa instead of specifying the country. Therefore Africa must be a country and not a continent. She had really thought about it, haha. My ex once asked me where is New Hampshire exactly? It's in western Massachusetts, right? We live in Massachusetts and he'd spent most of his life in New England. He was a smart guy but didn't pay a lot of attention in school, so he had some strange gaps in his knowledge. General intelligence is a lot rarer than specialized knowledge. Most people learn one specific thing and remain ignorant of everything else. I had to help a pediatric heart surgeon put air in his car tire one day. AHHH. That's hot as he grabs the tray of tater tots he made from the oven. Dude graduated with a 3.9 plus GPA in engineering and got his MBA at the same time. A medical student friend of mine was gazing philosophically into the water off the back of my dock when a fish leapt from the depths. He then looked at us like he'd cracked a code and asked why do two fish always jump at once. He was referring to the ripples caused when the fish leaves the water and the ripples caused when the fish re-enters. Friend of mine has a nice car, but it's pretty old, 2004, I think. One day, she says her car has finally had it. It will not start, won't turn over or anything. She calls a mechanic friend of hers to come to the house. He can't figure it out. He tests the battery, and it seems fine, so he figures it must be the starter. But he can't fix that in her garage, so she has to get it towed there. So I'm driving her around because she has no car. The tow truck comes to her house the next day. Turns out that the car was left and drive. All the tow truck guy had to do was put the car in park and it started right away. When someone was asking me to change their username for them, they wanted a username that almost looked like a password as it had initials and numbers in it with an exclamation mark. Yeah, can you make that capital K lowercase b and 32, then capital G lowercase b and 12 followed by a capital 1. I was like, you mean an exclamation mark or the finance company? This person is a coder who knows every programming language just about and is a member of Mensa. So I'm going to guess that this guy has an inner monologue when he types and that he calls it a capital 1 just to remember where it is on the keyboard and it eventually just replace the word in his vocabulary. So many for one person. My co-worker is as intelligent as she is stupid. I mean, I guess she's book smart and not real life smart. We work at a library and sometimes people would beep at the security sensors when they came in, not left. Usually it was if they had a book from a public library, We were at a school, and it wasn't a big deal. But then she would say that it's because they had an overdue book. But the desensitizing machine wasn't even hooked up to our computer. Like the desensitizing machine and the computer don't talk to each other, and our checkout system is through a website. Not even software that you don't need internet for. You could literally take the desensitizing machine anywhere and plug it in. But she was convinced it was people with overdue books. Like, yeah, let's shame people who have overdue books who might be returning them. Another stupid thing I heard her say and do was a student came up to her and asked her to sign a paper for him. Didn't ask what it was for, or why. Knew it was a troublemaking kid. It was a blank piece of paper. The kid had apparently used it to make it look like a pass to get out of class to go somewhere else. But she said, well, I signed it with my right hand, so it's not even valid. She was left-handed. I had to leave the room when I heard that. My film class professor in a 4th year film class that was quite serious proudly admitted that he had never seen the Star Wars movies because he was too old for that when it came out initially, and he intentionally avoids watching it. It was a stupid thing to be proud of, like incredibly dumb. How can you teach us about popular culture film if you actively avoid classics, good or bad, because you have some complex about not being a baby? Also, Star Wars never struck me as childish. It was a very odd thing for a man in his mid-50s with a PhD in this sort of thing to say. We were watching news coverage of XXXTentacion's funeral, and when the newscaster mentioned how he would beat up his girlfriend so severely she required a GoFundMe page, my dad let loose with a tangent on how the racists of yesteryear were right. Black men are oversexed brutes. Intelligence is very difficult to quantify, and it's usually concentrated to very precisely defined areas of expertise or people possessing esoteric qualifications. No one is impervious to the effects of stupidity. Everyone said something vacuous or behavior in an asinine way. I think most stupidity can actually be attributed to nescience rather than impaired cognitive ability. There are many things I do not know or have an ineptitude for, but that doesn't mean anyone cannot acquire the knowledge or the pertinent skills. The most silly thing I've ever heard from a colleague who is preeminent in our field was, I wonder if they are dead yet, as we made our way to a morgue to conduct rudimentary investigations. The contempt and self-loathing emanated from him for days. He immediately knew what he'd said, and yet he keeps forgetting this is where dead people are stored. He's incommensurably more intelligent than anyone I've ever known, but the morgue continues to confound him on his best days. My grandfather was an engineer for Boeing, and in his old age volunteered and gave tours once a week at an aerospace museum. He spent his entire retirement rotting his brain with chain emails, Fox News, and Gulf television, and virtually nothing else. Very typical engineer personality, just hated deviating from routine or going out to socialize on his own. If it weren't for his wife, he never would have left the house. Towards the end of his life he derailed more than one dinner lecturing us earnestly about chemtrails. This was not the most appallingly stupid thing his diet of sensationalist bulls led him to believe in, but given his previous career it was downright tragic. Girl in class forgot gravity existed. She was the best student in the class, but she thought that when you would tilt a cup, the water would stay parallel to the bottom of the cup, and it wouldn't spill out. This was in the middle of physics class. Of all the classes to forget this in. My sister, a nurse, once asked, how do blind people get around when it's dark out, when we saw a blind man walking by at night. My sister is 20 years old and very clever, but last week she stormed into my room and yelled, OMG, popcorn is called popcorn because it's literally popped corn. My cousin was in a freshman science class at University of Michigan, and the professor was lecturing about albinos and how they often have trouble adjusting socially because of their odd appearance. She said, yeah, we had an issue with a lot of albinos in my high school. They were always getting into a lot of fights and causing trouble. The whole class sat in puzzled silence at the proposition that she had several albinos at her high school, until one person chimed in with, are you sure you aren't thinking of Albanians? She was thinking of Albanians. Regarding To Kill a Mockingbird, the people of Macomb weren't racist. They just had a system that worked for the majority of people living there. Smartest guy I know, PhD in philosophy, masters in finance, refuses to look at any evidence of evolution existing and claims only microevolution exists where a species changes to adapt to its environment but no species has ever evolved to become another species. So he can admit that life forms change their genetic makeup over time to adapt to their environment, but for some reason he believes there's some magic wall that stops it from going too far. Refuses to look at hundreds of equine fossils that show that horses evolved from a small, forest floor mammal to the large, plain dweller we see today, despite the massive amounts of evidence and data. Not to be too edgy, but smart people can be brainwashed. I was talking about my friend who lives in Phoenix, and dude is all confused and says, how all I could think to say was, like in Arizona he says, OHH, I thought you were talking about like, the 51st state. If he wasn't from the US, I would understand. But he was born and raised here. Another person thought Celsius grew exponentially, like the difference between 100 and 101 was greater than the difference between 50 and 51. They were insisting it was a less accurate way to measure temperature. A smart person said to me that 40% of the country has diabetes. They then said that they read 40% are prone to diabetes and insisted that the word prone meant it has happened to you. Even after dictionary reference I couldn't win the argument. An old roommate of mine, who is naturally pretty smart, has had a few doozies. He thought the words twit and tea were the same, and always thought it was weird kids books used twit so casually. He would buy a bunch of Wendy's cheeseburgers, then just place them in the microwave for a few days, no on, just closed, to stay fresh. He did the same with tortilla chips a few times. Anytime he would start to lose an argument, he'd say well in my opinion and follow up with the same point he was just defeated on, like it being his opinion changed reality. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.